Lost video games, once promising adventure, mystery, or terror, now gone, erased, abandoned, or shrouded in unsettling rumors. These are the titles whispered about online, where fragments of screenshots and blurred memories are all that remain. Today, we're diving into the lost video game Iceberg, uncovering mysteries that only grow darker and more disturbing the deeper we go. From canceled classics to cursed cartridges, some stories will make you question if these games were ever meant to be found. Let's begin. McDonald's DS games. Okay, so McDonald's actually had a Nintendo DS game, but it wasn't something you'd pick up at your local GameStop. These games were strictly made for employee training. Like, imagine being hired at McDonald's and instead of sitting through some corporate video, you're handed a DS to learn how to flip burgers and work the register. That's the vibe here. The main one people talk about is E-Crew Development Program, or ECDP. It came out in Japan around 2010. The game was developed by McDonald's in collaboration with Nintendo, which is a wild collab, right? And it was used to train employees on tasks like customer service, taking orders, and food prep. It's essentially gamified corporate training, which sounds kind of boring on paper, but is kind of a genius move when you think about how engaging video games are. The gameplay itself was super straightforward. You'd use the touchscreen to practice taking orders, assembling burgers, and managing the workflow in the kitchen. The idea was to simulate the real-life chaos of McDonald's kitchen, but in a controlled, bite-sized format. There were mini games for specific tasks, and it even tracked your progress to see how well you were learning. It was a way for McDonald's to standardize training while making it less soul-sucking for employees. Plus, in Japan, gaming is such a cultural norm that this approach made total sense. Now, the reason why this game is considered lost is because it was never sold or made available to the public. It was strictly for McDonald's employees, and even then, only in Japan. Copies of the game are incredibly rare, and finding one is like hitting the jackpot for gaming historians or collectors. Most of what we know about it comes from leaked footage, photos, and anecdotes from people who have stumbled across a copy. What's even crazier is how much hype there is around this game now. So since the game was never released to the public and only distributed internally to McDonald's employees in Japan, there were only a limited number of cartridges floating around. Think about it, most of these probably stayed in training centers or ended up in storage closets before getting trashed when the DS fell out of use. Now here's the wild part. When one of these cartridges does show up for sale, which is super rare, it can fetch anywhere from $2,000 to $3,500 USD, depending on the condition and whether it's complete with the original case. That's not exactly pocket change for a training tool, but it makes sense when you consider how niche and obscure this game is. It's like owning a piece of gaming folklore. Plus, there's the Nintendo factor. Anything tied to them automatically gains collector value. Next up, we got Yaya Beebiss 1. This whole saga started with a strange appearance in an old magazine. Back in the early 1990s, there was this video game rental service called VideoZone, and they had a catalog listing all of their available NES titles. Now, this catalog was nothing fancy, just pages of titles all typed out, but right there in the middle of the list was a game called Yaya Beebiss 1. No artwork, no description, just the title. And if you're thinking, yeah, that sounds like a joke or a placeholder, well, you're not alone, because that's exactly what everyone thought at first. And here's the thing, nobody could actually prove it existed. It wasn't available in stores, and no one had ever played it or seen a cartridge. Gamers who came across the name in the catalog were like, what is this, and why does it sound like a meme from 30 years in the future? It really does, bro. Editor, can you make like a bottom text meme of Yaya Beebiss 1? Anyways, naturally, people assumed it was either a typo, a placeholder for an unnamed game, or just a straight up prank by whoever compiled the catalog. And that's where the mystery really took off. For years, Yaya Beebiss 1 floated around as this bizarre piece of gaming trivia. Forums like Digital Press and Lost Media Wiki became obsessed with it. People scoured NES databases, rental store inventories, and old gaming magazines to find any trace of the game, but nothing turned up. The title alone was so absurd and nonsensical that it took on a life of its own. Fans started speculating about what kind of game it could have been. A wacky platformer, a mistranslated Japanese import, or something totally surreal like the name implies. Then, in a wild twist, the mystery got even weirder. Some people speculated that Yaya Beebiss 1 was actually a garbled listing for a real, lesser-known game called Doki Doki Yunchi. That game was a Japanese exclusive release, and if you squint really hard, you could imagine a lazy catalog worker seeing the title and coming up with something like Yaya Beebiss 1. But there's no definitive proof of this theory either, so it just adds to the chaos. Fast forward to today, and the legend of Yaya Beebiss 1 is pretty much solidified as gaming folklore. The title is referenced all over gaming culture, popping up in memes, YouTube videos, and even fan-made projects. A few indie developers have even created mock-ups of what they think the game could have been, leaning into the absurdity of its name. There's even a playable fan game called Yaya Beebiss 2, which obviously pokes fun at the fact that the first game doesn't even exist. Next up, we're going to talk about Minecraft's lost versions. First, some context. Minecraft was still in its early stages of development back in 2010, with updates coming out fast and loose as the game gained popularity. Alpha 1.1.1 was released on September 18th, 2010, but it was available for an incredibly short window, less than 3 hours. The reason was because it introduced a game-breaking bug that caused player screens to turn completely gray, making the game unplayable. Imagine logging in, expecting your familiar pixelated world, and instead you're greeted by this eerie gray void. Notch, the game's creator at the time, quickly pulled the update and replaced it with Alpha 1.1.2 to fix the issue. Because of how short-lived Alpha 1.1.1 was, it quickly became one of the rarest Minecraft versions ever. Most players didn't even have time to download it before it was replaced. For years, this made it a holy grail for Minecraft archivists and lost media enthusiasts. People remembered its existence, but no one could find a copy to preserve. The whole ghostly gray screen thing gave it an almost mythical vibe, like it wasn't just a buggy update, but a digital specter lurking in the game's history. Then, in 2021, the mystery of Alpha 1.1.1 took a dramatic turn. A user named Luna was going through some old files in her hard drive when she found an archived Minecraft version labeled Minecraft Alpha 1.1.1. She downloaded the files, and sure enough, it was the real deal. For the first time in over a decade, players could access this elusive update and experience the infamous gray screen glitch for themselves. Luna's discovery was celebrated across the Minecraft community, with archivists and fans praising her for recovering such an important piece of gaming history. The ghostly gray screen bug itself has no deeper meaning. It was caused by a coding error, but its rarity and mysterious vibe made it one of the most iconic stories in Minecraft's development. Today, thanks to Luna's discovery, Alpha 1.1.1 is preserved and available for those curious enough to check it out. It's kind of a reminder of how far Minecraft has come, and also just how much the community values even the smallest pieces of the game's history. Now, pre-classic is the term for versions of Minecraft that came before its first public release in May 2009. Back then, it wasn't even called Minecraft, it was called Cave Game, and it was more of a proof of concept than an actual game. Marcus Notch Persson, the game's creator, was inspired by games like Infiniminer and Dwarf Fortress, and wanted to experiment with a block-based building system. These early builds were essentially test versions where Notch played around with basic mechanics like placing and destroying blocks. In these versions, there wasn't really much to do. The first pre-classic build features a blank, flat plane made of grass blocks and the iconic cobblestone texture. There were no mobs, no crafting, and definitely no survival mechanics, just a blank slate for placing down blocks. These early builds weren't widely distributed. Notch shared them with a few close friends and later uploaded them to forums for feedback. Because they weren't officially archived, many of these versions are considered lost. A handful have been recovered over the years thanks to dedicated archivists who dug through old files and forum posts, but others are still missing. The Minecraft community has been working tirelessly to preserve what they can. Groups like OmniArchive have scoured the internet digging through old forum posts, screenshots, and hard drives to recover these builds. While a significant number of early versions have been rediscovered and preserved, there's still a lot of gaps in the timeline, which is kind of sad. Now, still with Minecraft, the Pocket Edition demo was launched in August 2011, around the same time that Mojang was developing Minecraft's full-fledged mobile version for Android and iOS. This was way before mobile games became the powerhouse industry they are today, so the idea of bringing a game like Minecraft, famous for its open-world sandbox and creativity, to a mobile platform was groundbreaking. The demo was distributed exclusively on the Android market, which is now Google Play Store, and it was designed to give people a taste of what Minecraft could be like on their phones. Unlike the full Pocket Edition that came later, this demo was bare bones. The gameplay was limited to creative mode, so there were no survival mechanics, no mobs, and only a small selection of blocks. The world size was tiny, much smaller than the infinite worlds we're used to now, and you couldn't save your progress. It was more of a tech showcase than a full game, meant to gauge player interest and test how well the game ran on different Android devices. The demo was received positively by most players, but because it was so limited and overshadowed by the PC version's rapidly growing popularity, it didn't stick around for long. Mojang pulled the Pocket Edition demo from the Android market not long after its release, likely as they prepared for the full version's launch in October 2011. After that, the demo was quietly forgotten and Mojang never re-released it. What makes this version so compelling as lost media is just how little documentation even exists. Unlike other Minecraft versions that have screenshots, forums, or gameplay videos from fans, the Pocket Edition demo has almost no visual record, which now that I'm reading that in my script, good luck to my editor for finding anything to put on screen right now. Anyways, most players didn't think to archive it or even capture footage because it was just a temporary demo. Today, finding a functioning APK or Android package file for the Pocket Edition demo is next to impossible, making it one of the rarest Minecraft builds out there. Custom developer builds of Minecraft are like hidden treasures in the game's history. These are the builds that Mojang's developers created for internal testing, often never intended for public release. They're crucial for understanding how Minecraft evolved over the years, but are now mainly lost, existing pretty much only in memories. These developer builds are pretty much exactly what they sound like, versions of the game that Mojang's team used to test new features, mechanics, and bug fixes. These builds were often incomplete, experimental, and sometimes downright broken. They weren't polished for public consumption, but they were essential for pushing Minecraft development forward. For example, a developer build might have been used to test a new mob like the Enderman, the implementation of redstone mechanics, or tweaks to terrain generation. The majority of these builds existed purely as work-in-progress snapshots, loaded up on a dev's PC, and then were just completely discarded once their purpose was served. What makes these builds so intriguing is how often they've left faint traces in Minecraft's lore. Sometimes a developer would share screenshots of a new feature on Twitter or forums, giving players a tantalizing glimpse into what was coming. These moments fueled speculation, with fans dissecting every pixel of an image to guess what Mojang was cooking up. Other times, features seen in these custom builds would never make it into the game at all, like abandoned mobs, blocks, or biomes that remain mysteries to this day. One notable example of a developer build that slipped through the cracks is the so-called Furnace Girl build. This was an internal Mojang test where they accidentally replicated the player model with a placeholder character shaped like a furnace. The build was never meant to be seen by players, but stories about it have circulated around the internet and within the community. And then another example is an early concept for the Sky Dimension, or the Aether, a floating island biome that Mojang worked on but ultimately scrapped in favor of the End. Recovering these builds is a challenge because they were rarely archived. They weren't distributed publicly, and Mojang's team didn't always prioritize saving older versions once a new update was ready. The Minecraft community, known for its dedication, has occasionally unearthed files or reconstructed features based on screenshots and dev commentary, but a lot of these builds are likely lost forever. Now, the world of lost Minecraft mods and resource packs is a gold mine of forgotten creativity and nostalgia. Mods and resource packs have always been the lifeblood of Minecraft's community, allowing players to completely reshape the game with custom mechanics, visuals, and sounds. But because these were often created by individuals or small teams, many have been lost to time, disappearing into the void of forgotten websites, broken download links, and abandoned projects. Minecraft's modding scene started gaining traction around 2010, but back then it was a free-for-all. Creators would upload their work to random websites, forums like Minecraft Forums or Planet Minecraft, or even obscure file sharing platforms. As these platforms shut down or links broke, countless mods and resource packs became inaccessible. For example, mods hosted on sites like Mediafire or Mega were often wiped after a certain period of inactivity, leaving zero trace behind. And then if a creator stopped maintaining their mod or resource pack, it could vanish entirely. Early mods were often tied to specific versions of Minecraft, so when Mojang updated the game, mods would break unless they were patched, and many creators simply didn't have the time or motivation to keep up. This has left entire generations of mods locked to old versions like Beta 1.7.3 or Release 1.2.5. Once players moved on to newer versions, many mods became relics of the past, with only scattered screenshots or gameplay videos to remind us of what they were. One infamous example is the Aether mod, which introduced a floating sky dimension filled with unique mobs, dungeons, and biomes. While the Aether itself is still available and has even been revived in newer versions, many early builds of this mod are lost. These builds had different features, textures, and mechanics that are no longer accessible. Another lost gem is AdventureCraft, a modding framework that allowed players to create custom adventure maps with advanced scripting and mechanics. It was groundbreaking for its time, enabling things like cutscenes, custom GUIs, and even boss battles. However, as Minecraft updated and newer tools like command blocks emerged, AdventureCraft became obsolete. Its website is long gone, and most maps created with it are now inaccessible. A more niche example is Finite Liquid, a mod that experimented with realistic water physics before Mojang even touched the idea. It allowed for dynamic flooding, pipes, and water storage. While remnants of it can still be found, many early versions and concepts of it are still considered lost. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I have a ton of nostalgia for all of these mods I just mentioned, and it's just sad that they're gone. Resource packs, or texture packs as they were called back in the day, were also prone to vanishing. Many creators poured hours into retexturing every mob, block, and item, only for their work to disappear when hosting sites went down or creators moved on. And then one resource pack that lives on in legend is the Silent Hill pack, which completely transformed Minecraft into a creepy, foggy survival horror game. It paired perfectly with custom maps, and it was a favorite among YouTubers, but early builds of this pack have disappeared, with only fan recreations keeping its legacy alive. But the modding community is still active and relentless, thank God, but that's all I'm gonna say about Minecraft. I feel like I've ranted about Minecraft, I just love talking about it, guys, my fault. But let's move on to the next one. Next up we have the Sacred Pools. The Sacred Pools is one of Sega's most curious and mysterious projects from the late 1990s. Released in 1997, or rather almost released, it was a full motion video, or FMV game, designed to appeal to a mature audience. Sega planned it for multiple platforms, including the Sega Saturn, PlayStation, and Windows PC, but the game was ultimately cancelled, making it a key piece of lost gaming history. The game's concept was built around an interactive adventure set in a fantasy world. The plot involved exploring a mystical land filled with danger and temptation, all revolving around the Sacred Pools. The gameplay promised branching storylines and puzzles with live-action video clips featuring real actors to immerse the viewer. It was marketed as a mature game leading heavily into seductive themes. However, reports from early testers suggested that it was clunky and awkward, with subpar acting and mechanics that felt more like watching a bad sci-fi show than playing a compelling game. Sega had high hopes for the Sacred Pools, but quietly canceled it before launch. While the reasons aren't entirely clear, it's likely a combination of poor reception from testers, declining interest in FMV games by the late 1990s, and the game's low overall quality. Sega shelved it without much explanation, and since it was never released publicly, it quickly faded into obscurity. The game became somewhat of a myth in the gaming world. For years, there were only rumors and a handful of blurry screenshots to even suggest that it even existed. Then, in 2022, a near-complete version was discovered and made available online. For the first time, people could see what Sega had been working on and why it probably stayed on the shelf. The footage revealed a game that struggled to balance its ambitious ideas with the limitations of FMV technology, resulting in a product that was more strange than enjoyable. So yeah, I don't think Sega should try making any more sex games. Next up we have Sad Satan. Sad Satan is one of the most infamous and mysterious pieces of supposed lost gaming media wrapped in layers of creepypasta, urban legend, and internet lore. The game gained notoriety in 2015 when a YouTuber named Obscure Horror Corner claimed to have discovered it on the dark web. Its reputation as a deeply unsettling and possibly dangerous game has kept it a topic of fascination and speculation since. So, the story began when Obscure Horror Corner uploaded a series of videos showcasing gameplay from what they described as a disturbing, surreal horror game. According to the YouTuber, they found a link to the game on the dark web via a forum. Once downloaded, the game revealed itself to be unsettling and cryptic, featuring strange visuals, eerie sound effects, and cryptic messages. The gameplay was minimal, mostly consisting of walking through dimly lit hallways while encountering unsettling audio, such as distorted voices, reversed music, and occasional human screams. Disturbing images like distorted faces or historical figures such as Adolf Hitler would flash on screen, which, obviously would add to this awful, unsettling nature and atmosphere. The mystery surrounding the game's content deepened due to its strange symbols, strings of numbers, and reversed audio clips that players speculated could be references to conspiracies, dark web culture, or real-life atrocities. None of these theories were ever definitively proven, but the cryptic nature of the game fueled extensive online speculation. Some players even claimed that the game caused strange behavior in their computers, leading to rumors that it contained malware or ghosts. But then the lack of a download link from Obscure Horror Corner led to questions about the game's authenticity. The YouTuber cited the disturbing nature of the game as their reason for withholding it from public use, but the decision added to the intrigue but also raised skepticism, as a lot of critics suggested that it could just be a fabricated story designed to generate attention. Not long after the videos went viral, independent developers and trolls created their own versions of Sad Satan, which obviously was fake. One clone version, which introduced graphic depictions of violence and gore, deviated a lot from what Obscure Horror Corner had shown, and it further muddied the waters, but who really cares? Next up we got Kill Switch. Kill Switch is one of those legendary lost games that hovers somewhere between being creepy and like an urban legend and an actual piece of gaming history, except no one seems to have a working copy to prove that it ever really existed. The story goes that a company called Carvina Corporation allegedly released Kill Switch back in 1989, but only a few thousand copies were ever made. Once you beat it, or just got close to the end, it was said to erase itself completely, leaving nothing behind but your memory of a game that basically self-destructed. That's the core of Kill Switch's mystique. The idea that this game was designed to vanish the moment you finished it, like some kind of digital ghost. Supposedly, players booted it up and discovered a super eerie horror puzzle vibe. There were two playable characters, Porto, a pixelated girl, and Ghast, a literal invisible demon that you couldn't even see on screen, which made the game practically impossible to navigate. Legend says that if you somehow persevered and made it to the final sequence, the game would just delete itself from your computer, no trace left. That autocorrect concept alone turned Kill Switch into a cult obsession. Gamers love a good mystery, especially one tied to the earliest days of indie or experimental horror titles. Historically, no one's been able to confirm the existence of Carvina Corporation or even dig up solid evidence that Kill Switch was a real release. The official story is so full of holes that a lot of people figure it must be a creepypasta or an internet myth. Yet the legend refuses to die. Every few years, someone pops up online claiming that they found a dusty copy at a flea market, or that they remember playing it as a kid, and then they disappear without posting any proof. There's even one rumor that one copy sold for a ridiculous sum in some obscure auction, but the buyer, an alleged rich collector, never released the footage of his playthrough. And then, cue dramatic eye roll, because I don't think anybody really thinks that this shit is real. But it's a fun little urban legend. Whether it's real or not, Kill Switch stands as a prime example of how gamers can latch onto a story, fill in the blanks with imagination, and keep the myth alive. You could compare it to those unconfirmed haunted Pokemon cartridges or the Polybius arcade conspiracy. Each one has enough mystery to spark endless speculation, but not enough proof to lock it down as fact. If Kill Switch was actually found, it would probably become an instant museum piece, or get dissected by programmers eager to crack its code. But to this day, we've got zero verified code, zero gameplay videos, beyond fan-made recreations, and a whole lot of hearsay. So if you're itching to play Kill Switch yourself, your best bet is to check out the many indie tributes people have made, or read the creepypastas that keep the legend alive today. Next up, we got Silent Hills. Silent Hills was gearing up to be the next big entry in the legendary Silent Hill franchise. A project so hyped it felt like it could redefine horror gaming forever. Then, like a nightmare you can't quite shake but can never fully remember, it vanished. But the path to that disappearance is a wild story in its own right. First off, the big names attached were enough to make any horror fan's jaw drop. Hideo Kojima, the mastermind behind Metal Gear Solid, teamed up with Guillermo del Toro, the acclaimed filmmaker who has a knack for mixing fantasy, horror, and stunning visuals. Add The Walking Dead's Norman Reedus as the star, and you had a Hollywood meets gaming trifecta that seemed unstoppable. And if you were around in 2014, you probably remember PT, short for Playable Teaser, a free download on the PlayStation Store that basically broke the internet overnight. Players found themselves trapped in a looping corridor jam-packed with cryptic clues, a terrifying ghost named Lisa, and some of the scariest jump scares gaming had seen in years. And then when you finally unraveled the puzzle, the reveal was a short cinematic showing Ritus's face, followed by the title, Silent Hills. Cue fans losing their collective minds. Historically, the Silent Hill series has been a cornerstone of survival horror since the late 90s, but it hit a rough patch with a few less than stellar sequels. So Silent Hills felt like a revival, with Kojima's cinematic storytelling and Del Toro's horror expertise promising an experience that could shake you to your core. Even mainstream media started taking notice, intrigued by the idea of a blockbuster director collaborating with one of gaming's most innovative minds. The synergy was palpable, and for a short while it seemed like Silent Hills might push the boundaries of psychological horror in a way that we hadn't seen since the original games made us fear every dark hallway. But behind the scenes, things at Konami, the publisher, were spiraling into corporate drama. Kojima's relationship with Konami was reportedly strained, resulting in a messy and very public falling out. While exact details remain tangled in rumors and partial statements, the end result was that Kojima left the company and Silent Hills was officially cancelled in 2015. Fans who had been riding the hype train were devastated, and they weren't the only ones. Guillermo del Toro was vocal about his disappointment, calling the cancellation a scorched earth move. Norman Reedus admitted that he was bummed too. The ultimate heartbreak for many, though, was that PT, the playable teaser, was unceremoniously yanked off the PlayStation Store. If you hadn't downloaded it before, you were out of luck. There was no official way to experience that eerie corridor again. People who still had PT on their consoles found themselves with what felt like a digital collector's item. Consoles with PT installed even started popping up on eBay for wild prices. It became gaming's version of a rare vinyl pressing that you can't legally reissue. The aftermath left a huge gap in horror gamers' hearts. Indie developers took notes from PT's design, creating loop-based horror experiences, cryptic puzzles, and that sense of slowly unraveling dread. Meanwhile, Kojima moved on to create Death Stranding, again collaborating with Norman Reedus, and even including a cameo from Del Toro, though more as a cameo model than a direct co-creator. In some ways, it felt like traces of Silent Hills' DNA ended up sprinkled throughout that project, just minus the explicit horror angle. Silent Hills then turned into one of the ultimate what-if stories in gaming. It wasn't lost in the sense of an ancient cartridge no one can find, but more in the sense that it was snatched away when it was on the brink of something groundbreaking. All that's left are memories of the scariest corridor in gaming history and a wave of fan theories about what might have been lurking beyond the final hallway. Years later, rumors flare up about possible revivals or new Silent Hill games, and indeed, new projects have been announced, but the specific Kojima Del Toro Reedus version remains locked in the realm of dreams. Or nightmares, I guess, depending how you look at it. If you want to play PT today, you either need a console that still has it installed, or you resort to fan remakes on PC, which kind of capture the vibe, but never perfectly encapsulate the original. It's become a modern gaming legend, the terrifying short demo that teased a masterpiece we'll never get to play in full. That alone ensures Silent Hills keeps an unbreakable grip on our collective imagination, haunting us far more effectively than any ghost could. Next up, we have City of the Dead. City of the Dead was the super hyped zombie shooter tied to none other than George A. Romero, the legendary filmmaker behind classics like Night of the Living Dead. Picture a gory, action-heavy video game set in Romero's cinematic universe, overflowing with undead mayhem, all teased to be the ultimate horror fan experience. And then it just vanished, leaving behind a handful of screenshots, a couple of eerie trailers, and a ton of questions about what could have been. Historically, development on City of the Dead kicked off in the mid-2000s under a deal with a publisher called Hip Interactive. The studio Kuju Entertainment, known for various mid-tier console and PC titles, was reportedly handling the heavy lifting. Fans immediately latched on to the promise of Romero's involvement. After all, he basically defined modern zombie lore. Early previews hinted at a storyline drenched in the same grimy, apocalyptic vibe as his movies, complete with the over-the-top and morally gray survivors just trying to make it out alive. For a hot minute, it seemed like City of the Dead was going to be everything a zombie lover could want. Think waves of the undead, gruesome takedowns, claustrophobic city settings, and those trademark Romero Society Under Siege themes. There was also buzz about co-op elements, letting you team up with a friend to battle through the chaos. well before co-op zombie games became the norm. Some fans even joked it might overshadow Resident Evil in terms of straight up brutality, but then out of nowhere, everything unraveled. In 2006, Hip Interactive hit major financial trouble and declared bankruptcy. Without a publisher to back them, the game's developers were left in limbo and the project quickly flatlined. Various rumors flew around. Did another publisher pick up the rights? Could Romero's name alone save it? But nothing stuck. Kuju moved on to other projects and City of the Dead went silent. Over time, the game transformed into a bit of an urban legend among horror gamers. A few teaser trailers still lurk on the internet showing messy corridors splattered with blood, slow-moving hordes, and short glimpses of survivors fending off the undead. Those who saw them back in the day remember the distinctly Romero flavor. Not quite as polished or big budget as Left 4 Dead, but definitely capturing that gritty, hopeless vibe of a world overwhelmed by The Walking Dead. From a modern standpoint, City of the Dead is often lumped in with other, like lost horror games, titles that had serious hype but never saw the light of day. Some fans argue that it could have been a sleeper hit, possibly even jumpstarting a whole new wave of zombie shooters years before the genre exploded. Others figure it might have ended up as a mediocre tie-in that capitalized on Romero's name but failed to stand out. We'll never really know. With George A. Romero's passing in 2017, any faint hope of resurrecting this specific project pretty much died with him. Sure, there are loads of other zombie games, Dead Island, Dying Light, Dead Rising, but none of them carry the official Romero stamp. That means City of the Dead remains the greatest what if in Romero's legacy. Now next up we have Force Ape. Force Ape is one of those mythic, half-remembered NES games that floated around in magazines back in the early 90s, then seemed to vanish without a trace, only to resurface years later in a form nobody really expected. The legend goes that a company named Sega was working on it, promising a frantic, side-scrolling beat-em-up starring a genetically modified ape that could suplex basically anything in its path. It sounded kind of bananas, pun intended, with insane screenshots of an ape tossing around bizarre enemies in a high-speed platformer. Then poof, the game never actually released, leaving fans to argue whether it ever existed in the first place. For a while, Force Ape was basically a punchline in the retro gaming community. Every so often, someone would upload leaked images or joke about how the game was either a total hoax or so weird that it got buried by the publisher. Old gaming mags like EGM or Nintendo Power were rumored to have tiny blurbs about it, but nobody had an actual cartridge or a legit ROM. That all changed around 2010 or 2011 when a supposed prototype ROM emerged online. Retro gamers and preservationists went into a full frenzy testing it out on emulators to see if this was the real deal or some elaborate troll. Turns out it was legit, though not exactly what the old previews had hyped up. Playing the prototype, you discover a freakishly fast platformer where your ape runs at breakneck speed, suplexes random mutants, and zips through levels that look part lab, part psychedelic nightmare. It's glitchy in places, the storyline is basically non-existent, and it can feel like you're on a sugar high while controlling the muscle-bound primate. But that chaos is precisely why people got hooked. For a game that nearly disappeared from history, Force Ape had just enough oddball charm to make everyone wonder how it would have fared if it actually shipped during the NES era. Historically, we're really not 100% clear on why Sega pulled the plug. Some guess it was behind schedule or over budget. Others claim that the game's weirdness didn't vibe with the market at the time. There was no shortage of side-scrollers back then, but Force Ape was arguably next level in how strange and hyper it was. By the time it leaked decades later, it'd become a prime example of could-have-been games. Stuff that looked so bonkers it might have carved out a cult following, had it ever hit store shelves. Even so, once that prototype landed, the rumors around Force Ape morphed from lost gem or elaborate troll to this actually existed and you can play it. Granted, it's an unfinished build with parts that feel raw or incomplete, but for people who love deep-cut retro gaming, it's like a holy grail. Vintage game streamers sometimes showcase it just to blow people's mind. Yes, I'm literally controlling a roided out monkey suplexing everything in sight at warp speed. Next up we have Half-Life Episode 4. Half-Life 2 Episode 4, sometimes referred to by fans as Return to Ravenholm, was meant to be another chunk of that iconic Half-Life saga, but it never made it out of Valve's shadowy pipeline. Sure, Half-Life 2 exploded the FPS world in 2004, and Episode 1 and Episode 2 kept the hype going. Yet Episode 4 remains this hazy what could have been teased in whispers and concept art. but ultimately scrapped before the public ever got more than a taste. Historically, the project wasn't even being developed in-house at Valve. They tapped Arcane Studios, who'd eventually rise to fame with Dishonored and Prey, to handle a standalone episodic entry set in or around the zombie-infested Ravenholm from Half-Life 2. The idea was to revisit that ultra-creepy atmosphere of headcrab-infested city streets, but this time with some fresh narrative beats and new mechanics. Fan rumors suggested you team up again with Father Grigori, the shotgun-wielding, scripture-quoting survivor from Ravenholm, and dig deeper into the city's twisted secrets. But around 2006 or so, the project began to sputter. Valve was juggling multiple Half-Life episodes, plus other big initiatives like the development of the Source engine. At the same time, Arcane had its own projects in the works. The Crossing was one that also ended up cancelled. Eventually, either due to creative differences, scheduling chaos, or a shifting strategy of Valve, nobody outside the studios knows the full story, Episode 4 got shuttered. All that remains are a few screenshots, some concept art of eerie corridors, and half-formed speculation about how it might have fit into a broader Half-Life timeline. From a modern perspective, the cancellation looms like a big what if. A section of fans desperately wanted more of Ravenholm's horror vibe. Zombies, gravity guns, and saw blades flying all over the place. Episode 4 might have expanded on that tension or possibly introduced brand new enemies and puzzle twists. Arcane's flair for immersive sim elements could have meshed perfectly with Half-Life's physics-based gameplay, potentially spinning up fresh ways to tackle head crabs or combine environmental hazards with your arsenal. Ever since, Half-Life players have been combing over every stray dev comment or snippet of concept art, hoping for an official revival. Valve, of course, is notoriously secretive about future plans. Just look at the endless wait for Half-Life 3. Arcane moved on and hit it big with Dishonored, which showcased that blend of atmospheric storytelling and creative combat they'd likely been bringing to the table. Every so often, a mention of Return to Ravenholm surfaces in gaming press, or a Valve insider references the prototype. Then the rumors flare up. Maybe someone will reboot it, or maybe fans will put together a mod that tries to capture the original vibe, but so far it stayed locked away. If you want a tiny window into what Episode 4 could have felt like, you can peep those leaked screenshots online. They show dimly lit hallways, electrified traps, and that same spooky Ravenholm aesthetic. It's sort of like looking at ghostly evidence of a game that almost was. There's also a handful of behind-the-scenes tidbits. Apparently you'd have brand new weapons or alt-fire mods, maybe a different spin on the gravity gun. Some dev notes even hinted at co-op elements, though that was never confirmed. Ultimately, Half-Life 2 Episode 4 joins the ranks of lost Valve projects, like the rumored Half-Life 3 prototypes and all those other faint glimmers that never saw daylight. For a fanbase as passionate as Half-Life's, the loss still stings. Even after Half-Life Alyx gave us a fresh taste of the universe, people still wonder, what if we'd actually gone back to Ravenholm under Arcane's helm? Sure, there's no guarantee it would have matched the towering legacy of the main game or even Episode 2, but for a series so beloved and so short on official continuations, Episode 4 remains this enigma, a half-realized dream from two studios known for reshaping the FPS genre. And like all good gaming mysteries, that unfulfilled potential might be exactly why it still fascinates us. Sometimes the games we don't get end up capturing our imaginations more than the ones that we do. Next up we have Possession. Possession was an ambitious zombie game in development by Volition, the same studio behind Saints Row and Red Faction, for the PS3 era. The big twist of this game, though, was that you wouldn't be any of the last humans fighting off hordes. You would be the zombie leader yourself, controlling an undead army against living survivors. Volition teased a high-speed, open-world environment where you'd infect humans to bolster your horde, evolve your zombie abilities, and pretty much wage war on any city foolish enough to resist. This all went down in the mid-2000s, right when next-gen consoles like the PS3 and Xbox 360 were dropping. Early reports hinted that Possession would show off the PS3's power with large-scale battles, destructible settings, and fast, brutal combat. A few pieces of concept art made their way into gaming news, showcasing freaky-looking zombies and over-the-top action. Then at some point, everything went radio silent. Volition never released an official statement announcing it was cancelled, but the project disappeared from any release schedules. Rumor is the studio shifted resources toward bigger, safer bets, like expanding the Saints Row franchise, while Possession quietly slipped off the radar. Because it never got past those early teasers, fans were left hanging, imagining how cool it might have been to command a massive zombie horde on the PS3. Some say it was ahead of its time, a chance to play the bad guy in a big, open-ended apocalypse. But without any public demo or footage, there's no way to confirm just how far along the game really was or how it would have been played. It's now remembered as one of those almost was titles, a creative concept that died before it could ever show the PS3 audience its full, undead potential. And that is the end of this iceberg I made, guys. I hope you enjoyed this one. This one was fun. I hope you like the new icebergs I've been making myself. And yeah, everybody have a great night and sweet dreams. Oh, also subscribe if you haven't already, you know. All right, bye.